Hello, welcome back to Dashing Swordsman Painting, and happy Orctober! Today we'll be painting an Urrok Chieftain from Ghamak Miniatures, and putting him on the square-based option so that he can lead an army in a rank-and-flank wargame. This model is a 3D print, and it printed super easily with the pre-supports and went together great with some super glue. I really like the angle that the sculptor took with kind of the low cap on his forehead and the hunched forward, aggressive posture. I think it looks like a really cool model. After he was all assembled, I primed him with an inexpensive rattle can of flat black paint. I especially like the rattle can because it helps hide any little residual layer lines from the print. I also glued him to a little lid to use as a temporary painting handle, and glued his base to another one so that I could paint it separately. Then I dry brushed an ivory paint all over the model to help me visualize the details and the high points. I'm going to be using a kind of traditional base coat highlight method for this guy, but it looks like it would actually be a great model for some slapchop if you wanted to go that route. I decided to put my two thin coats paint range from Duncan Rhodes line to work today, starting with orc hide, obviously, for the base coat on the skin. I'm starting with the deepest and hardest to reach areas on the model, and then planning on working my way out toward the surface details. That way I'm not accidentally hitting something finished while trying to get the paintbrush way down into his neck folds. I gave the skin an all-over coat, and then gave it a second one to make sure I had complete and smooth coverage. The neck and hands were really the only exposed skin on this guy. Next up in the triad is Goblinoid Green. I'm thinning this with some water and then applying the top 50 to 75% of the exposed skin surfaces, trying to concentrate a little bit on the top-facing and forward-facing aspects, kind of what you'd see from looking at the model from the tabletop. I'm not hitting the areas deep in the shadows like the back of the neck at all. And the last color for the skin is Troll Snot Green, which is a great name. And again, I'm thinning this with a little bit of water, and then I'm going to paint it on the top 25-ish%. After the first pass, I did a second one just to hit the highest kind of dot-ish points on things like the knuckles and the nose. For the fur cloak, I'm starting off with a base coat of cuirass leather, and then give it a second coat to make sure I have really good coverage. Next, for the midtone, I'm going to use boar hide. My strategy here is to kind of do a decent overbrush, like a heavy dry brush, except that the paint is a little thicker. I'm trying to let the sculpt of the fur do the work for me, and then have the base coat really just be in the recesses as a shadow. Finally, quite appropriately, is fur cloak for the highlight. Here, I'm trying to be a little more careful and hit just the tips of each of the sculpted fur bits, maybe the top third or so of each one. The sculpted bits are big enough, and I can kind of do the same overbrush style on a lot of it, which is super time saving. I decided to do the armor in a kind of a black-gray tone, so I started with Death Reaper for the base coat. I hit all the main armor pieces and decided to do the back of the shield in the same color. Then I used Dungeon Stone Gray for some scratchy highlights. I figured this would kind of make it look like a battle damage armor. I'm trying to focus a little bit on the edges of the armor panels, areas that I think are most likely to get hit by an enemy blade, and also reflect the light and show the panel on the mini. I'm going to work my way around all the main armor pieces and also not forget to hit the back of the shield. Next, for the pop-out red details on the miniature, I'm starting with Sanguine Scarlet for the base coat. I'm going to use this for the main part of the shield and also for the plume on his helmet. This definitely needed a second coat to get good coverage over the black primer. Then I used Demon Red to highlight the top edges. I thinned it about 50-50 with some matte medium just to try and soften the transition from the base coat. On the shield, I used the brush at a sideways angle to try and hit the raised parts. I think it was super time efficient and neat. I focused a second coat on kind of the upper center of each of the sections to try and make it look like the light is hitting a partial dome shape that the shield makes. On the plume, I also tried to focus on the upward facing and standout parts that would catch the light. The 50-50 mix came in really handy here. I was able to do a couple of thin coats to really try to get some good color progression. Then I started with some Noble Steed Brown for the leather details. I used this for the bedroll on the top of the pack, the straps at the top of the boots, and his kind of undershirt. Next was Dry Rust Brown, also thinned 50-50 with a matte medium. This looked like it would be a significant step up of a transition from the previous color, so I figured thinning it would help soften that transition. As always, I'm putting it on the upward facing sections and kind of the middle top of the panel sections on the bootstraps. Once again, thinning it with medium allowed me to build up the color with a second and even a couple extra layers on the sections that I really wanted to highlight. This didn't take a ton of extra time. By the time I worked my way around the model, the first sections were dry and ready for another layer. For the main part of the backpack, I decided to go with another gray tone. I'm starting with Eidolon Gray for the main part of the pack. I liked the color a lot, so I decided to also do the main part of the boots with it. Then I used Rodent Gray for some scratchy highlights. For the bones strapped to his pack, I'm starting with a base coat of Skeleton Legion, and I'm also going to use this for his teeth. Then I'm going to use Vampire Fang for the highlight, hitting the top 2/3 to 3/4-ish initially, and then a second layer on just the top sections. Next, I'm going to use Gizmo Fur for, appropriately, the fur trim base coat. This is for the armor trim, the helmet trim, and the cordage around the shield. Then a quick highlight with Manticore Ochre as the next color up. The sculpted details here are really your friend. Turn the brush perpendicular to the direction of the chords, hit multiple sections with probably better care and accuracy than if you were trying to do each one individually. Next, I'm using Asmodeus Red for the main part of the ham snack hanging off his backpack, and also hitting the string of sausages underneath his pack. Then using some thinned Evil Eye red for the highlight. Next, I base coated the wood sections with Ancient Forest. Then using Wasteland Brown for the highlights. Next, I'm using Dwarven Iron for the metal parts of the buckles, the studs on his helmet, and the trim on the helmet sides, the blade of the axe, and the shield boss. Then I decided that some of the details should be in like a brass or gold to show them off, so I used the appropriately named Overlord brass to hit the icon on each side of the axe blade and the icons on the back of the backpack and the front of the helmet. Now, after a quick brown base coat and dry brush highlight on the base and a clean black edge around it, it's time to do a 360 admire of our finished Urrok Chieftain. Thanks again for joining us for Orctober here at Dashing Swords and Painting. Feel free to check out the Instagram for more hobby pictures and projects, and most importantly, have fun and good luck painting.